Now, back to political earthquakes. There was one in Australia today. The country got a new Prime Minister. They've evidently have expedited arrangements for these things down under, so a coup in his Liberal Party was launched in the afternoon and over by bedtime. No waiting around. Not quite the same as Mr Corbyn's rise, that one, but there has been an experience this year closer to home that may provide lessons for Mr Corbyn. It comes from Greece, the only EU member to have elected a radical left government in the era of austerity. Syriza came to office back in January there. The party ended up split this summer. There's an election on Sunday. The former finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, became a familiar figure. He's in London this evening. He was due to be on a platform with Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not sure Mr Corbyn made it, but I at least met up with Mr Varoufakis earlier and asked him whether he thought a Corbyn-led Labour Party could ever win a general election here.
Yes, of course. It won't be easy. Corbyn has to put together an economic plan that appeals to both the constituency within the Labour Party that elected him, but also a wider one. I think he's perfectly capable of doing that because, just like in the rest of Europe, I believe that people have had enough, have had a gutful of the standard narrative that Labour needs to be squeezed during the good times and then squeezed again even further during the bad times.
But it is your contention that there's a kind of a groundswell of opinion, as there clearly was in Greece, which was in much more desperate circumstances, a groundswell of opinion that says we're fed up, we've had enough time for a real change, not a cosmetic change.
You only have to talk to people around the place to recognise that there's not yet a groundswell of opinion that Corbyn should be Prime Minister, but that all politics, this constant attempt to satisfy the illusory median voter, with both parties, all parties, congregating on this fictitious person's shoulders and trying to serve his or her prejudices.
The centre ground of politics.
That I think people have had enough of the spin that this attitude generates, because if everybody says the same thing, the only way to differentiate your product, your political product, is by spinning. And I believe that everybody is sick and tired of that, even Tory supporters, Labour supporters, Liberal supporters, everyone. Since the Blair years, even before that, the Labour Party, to a large extent, lobotomized itself. It lost its way. It lost its capacity to be critical of British capitalism, which is what the Labour Party should be doing. They were utterly complicit in the way that the City of London was allowed to get away with murder. And then when the City of London imploded, the Labour Party, the Labour government, didn't have either the analytical capacity or the moral backbone to counter the bankers.
Do you think that Jeremy Corbyn or a radical left government in this country will, let's call it, the forces of conservatism, do you think those forces will find some way to attack a Corbyn-led government?
It's already happening. You only have to read the press now. Over the last week, for it. Let me give you one simple example. Jeremy Corbyn quite sensibly questioned the nature and texture of quantitative easing by the Bank of England. And he suggested an alternative.
People's QE, it was
and
called.
He was completely lambasted for that. Now, whose idea was this initially? It was a guy called Milton Friedman, who was Margaret Thatcher's guru. So when a radical left-winger like Corbyn revives an idea that came from the right, he gets lambasted in this way. This just goes to prove that it has already begun. But he has to be steadfast. He has to shower his critics and the ones who try to distort his message with rationality, with compassion, and with a degree of humour, I think.
Some think Corbyn is the end of control freakery in the Labour Party. Is that a good thing? Did that work for you in Syriza, or is that a bad thing?
We did not fall because we had pluralism of opinions. I received enormous support from people that disagreed with me, and up until the moment when the banks were closed down by the Eurogroup and the European Central Bank.
And it wasn't the informal politics, not wearing ties, or the idiosyncratic style?
I believe that this was our strength.
Right.
I never wore a tie in my life. If I were to wear a tie just because I became minister, that would symbolize hypocrisy. And the reason why we had 70%, 80% approval ratings during that period that we were in office was because people saw in us that we were not interested in spinning and we were not interested in using hypocrisy.
Have they come to you seeking your advice on economics or any other matter?
I don't think they've gone to anyone yet. I think they are trying to recover from their victory.
But have they intimated to you that they want to talk?
Yes, there are going to be some discussions.
Yanis Varoufakis, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, well, let us stand back and reflect on the magnitude of all this. Is this one of those moments where everything changes, or is this just a funny flurry that'll be over in a year or two before normal service is resumed? Well, I'm joined by Shelley Asquith, an activist and Vice President at the National Union of Students, Times journalist Phil Collins, he was former advisor to Tony Blair, and former special advisor to Harriet Harman, Ayesha Hazarika. Ayesha, I do want to talk to you first, because just give us the mood on the inside of the party. They're kind of the people who work for the party. That's their job, their profession, not the MPs or the activists, the people in the headquarters. How do they react to this?
Well, the people in the headquarters, and you would expect me to say this, are incredibly loyal to whoever the party leader is. I think the people in the party are still very upset, as the whole party is, about not just our first election defeat, but our second election defeat. So there's, we're all processing why that happened and trying to learn the lessons of that. We went straight into this very, very big leadership contest. And I think the party staff will be entirely loyal and work very, very hard for the new leader. But I think whether it's party staff, whether it's the PLP, whatever your views on whether you wanted Corbyn to win or not, you cannot deny the huge mandate that he has been given by the party.
Is it right to say a lot of the party staff are polishing their CVs at the moment and trying to find new jobs?
I don't think that's fair to say, because I think lots of them are very, very dedicated to the party. You don't really come in to the Labour Party for sort of great riches or anything like that. You come, it's a vocation,
you don't go
and
through
it's
the
quite
last 10 years and then suddenly become a Corbyn supporter, do you? I mean, it's a very different Labour Party today to 3 weeks ago.
It is, but I think the result, and this is quite painful as somebody who has worked for the Labour Party for quite a long time, I think it's a sort of cultural revolution from the members. I think the members are sending out quite a strong signal that they don't want sort of business as usual and politics as usual from the Labour Party. They do want something different. They want something that feels slightly different. They want possibly a less managerial style of politics. And whether you agree or disagree with Jeremy Corbyn's views, he's tapped into that sort of howl of rage that people on the left have felt since losing the election for the second time.
Or since the financial crash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Phil Collins, to what extent can this be blamed on the modernisers? It's your fault, isn't it? It's personally your fault.
Personally my fault,
yeah.
yes. Yeah,
no,
yes.
But you don't like the whole thing, but you've got to say that the other candidates were not sufficiently inspiring, were
I
they?
entirely agree. It's absolutely entirely my fault. No, I think clearly if Jeremy Corbyn's been elected leader of the Labour Party and John McDonnell is Shadow Chancellor, modernisation isn't going as well as it might be. So that's definitely true. It is definitely true also that the other candidates didn't inspire the Labour Party and they wanted something else, a huge mandate, as Ayesha says. So yes, that's true. The Labour Party hasn't renewed intellectually. I think that's also true. And all of these things now have to be done, because I don't think that the cul-de-sac into which the Labour Party has gone is in fact a durable answer to the problem that the members may well have identified, which is the Labour Party is a bit stuck. So I think, yes, you're right, clearly modernisation has stalled horribly. The Blair years in the Labour Party are something the Labour Party disowns. It doesn't like. It has to come to terms with its own victories, which is a peculiar thing for a movement to have to do, but it does. And it has to find a language which is way beyond Blair. We have to be able to go onto television programmes and not talk about Tony Blair. We never talk about Gordon Brown, weirdly enough, but we always talk about Tony Blair, and it's becoming pointless. We've got to get way past it. And the Labour Party has signalled in this way that it wants to go past it.
Right, well, look, let's ask the question of whether this can wash with the public. Because Varoufakis, the Greek finance minister, said he thinks there's a groundswell, a huge opinion, that enough is enough and, the workers have been pushed too far. Shelley, is there one?
Yeah, well, I mean, all this talk of modernisation is kind of irrelevant to me, because I've grown up in a politics where the consensus is about austerity, it is about blaming immigrants. And suddenly you've got the leader of the opposition who completely rejects that, isn't just breaking the consensus, but is offering people a choice for once, talking about free education, talking about tackling the housing crisis. That's modern to me, that's new and that's exciting.
I agree with doing those things, but you've got to remember, we are only 4 months after a general election in which the country elected a majority Conservative government. We have decent growth and good unemployment. We don't have the objective revolutionary conditions. We don't also have the tradition of extremist politics that Greece has. So the notion that we're on the verge of Podemos or Syriza seems to me a really fond one.
But I think the other thing we've got to recognise is, like, we cannot deny the mandate. That is like an absolute truth. But having a big mandate within a party does not necessarily mean you're going to build a bridge with the public. And that's what he's got to do now. He's got to show that he can build a bridge with the PLP, which is very important, and he's got to, the Parliamentary Labour Party, and he's got to show that he can turn what was a big political moment for the Labour Party into a big political movement that connects with the public. Because just think back to this last election and all the seats we should have won in those Tory marginal seats. You know, if we want to get back to power, we are going to have to connect with the public.
Shelley, is he, do you think, showing any sign of connecting to, let's call them Daily Mail readers, or Middle Britain, or whatever you want, the people who voted Conservative, who they need to vote Labour?
Well, like I said, it's about offering people a choice, and I don't think when we went into the election in May, we were offering as much of a choice from the Conservatives. And look, you know, SNP took Scotland by storm by offering that alternative. A lot of people turned to UKIP, yes, because actually they saw it as a different path. And I think Corbyn is offering the people who voted UKIP, the people who maybe didn't turn out to vote at all.
But can I just say on the Scotland thing, I think it's really important. I think on the Scottish question, the question was who would best stand up for Scotland, and the SNP was always going to win that question, you know, no matter what Labour had done, because of the big nationalist question that was at the heart of it.
The crucial thing about Corbynism is, I think, in answer to your question, Evan, is that no, he's not going to appeal to those people who voted Conservative in 2010. The idea is not that it's a new set of people are going to vote. They are constantly saying that 40% of the electorate don't vote, and that Corbyn will inspire those people to come out. So the huge assumption there is that turnout can grow enormously, and all the new people who are inspired to vote will all vote Labour. And in doing so, you won't lose other people who are already in your electorate.
And
that's what Corbyn
is. That your experience, Shelley? Come on, talk about your demographic, your group. But people who didn't vote, are they now saying they're enthused and they'll vote?
Well, yeah, we know that there's a huge number of young people that didn't turn out to vote at the last election, and a lot of young people are getting involved in the Corbyn campaign, joining the Labour Party because of this. But no, we can't just talk about
it's less than half of 1% of the population that voted in the Labour Party leadership. It is the same thing that always happens after a defeat, is you get a surge of people joining us. And every single movement styles itself as new politics. Gladstone styled himself as new politics in opposition to Palmerston. Okay. It's the oldest trick in the book.
One of the themes that sort of emerged today is the competing narratives of it's chaos, it's shambles, they don't know what they're doing, which have been some of the headlines, and it's new politics, and it's just old media giving it these stupid labels. Is it chaos or is it pluralism?
Well, I think it is what it is, basically, and it's kind of slightly, you know, unspun, and actually maybe that was part of the sort of appeal of why, you know, Jeremy did so well. And I think, you know, when New Labour came to, and in the 90s, Labour had to professionalise itself a lot because it had lost so many elections and people basically saw it as a bit of a rabble and a bit of a shambles. It had to professionalise itself, especially in the communications side. But I think, and even Phil, I think you probably agree, there is a bit of a hangover from that. There has been a bit of a blueprint about how we've sort of done things. Yeah, slightly. Although, and I think it did lend itself to people not feeling like politicians were communicating
I think that's true. But in defence of Jeremy Corbyn, let's remember, I remember being in Downing Street when we did a reshuffle. We made Margaret Beckett Foreign Secretary by accident. So the idea that Tony Blair was wonderful at all this stuff is completely wrong. It's always a bit chaos in politics. And most people don't notice. So I don't think we should be too harsh on that.
People quite, I mean, as much as the journalists say shambles, they quite liked being outside, hiding outside the Whip's office and all the late night excitement of it all.
I'm not sure the public over time will really treat chaos as somehow endearing. I think it won't look like
Shelley,
that.
just a last word on chaos.
I think it's really unfair to call it chaos. I think Corbyn's done a fantastic job of bringing people from all different parts of the party together into a cabinet, and I think it's really exciting what he's managed to do. I mean, give him a chance. It's only been a couple of days.
Give him a chance. Thanks all very much indeed.